I recently went to visit my cousin's house, and we had a banger of a time replaying through some old favorites. Generation 6 was part of our most formative memories, and a lot of those games happen to be licensed, and on the PS2. This is going to be a very nostalgic little episode for me, so come along and reminisce as I go over 5 licensed games that are surprisingly good. Again, out of any show in the whole wide world, Buffy the Vampire Slayer has been the cream of the crop for my cousins and I. Truly nothing compared to how obsessed with it we were growing up. We had all the figures, tons of statues, every CD, angel puppets, the spike puppet, just so much. I firmly stand by seasons 1 to 5 still being the peak of character progression and payoff ever told on TV. One Christmas, probably in 2007, my aunt sent me a copy of Buffy the Vampire Slayer Chaos Bleeds. She was an icon for that. I had no idea there even was such a thing, let alone that Value City would carry it. For almost an entire year, like clockwork, I woke up at 7 a.m., played for 1 hour before I had to get ready and leave for school. At night, I would call my cousin on the landline phone in our purple dining room and pace back and forth between there and the TV, trying to figure out how to get through the puzzles and bosses. In hindsight, things weren't nearly as hard as they were for us then, but that's the magic of not having YouTube guides to watch. Shout out to that same cousin last year for getting me a strategy guide in perfect condition. It was so great to look at those in-game screenshots and just breathe it all in again. This was one of the few games I consistently asked my dad to help me get through. He was never a Buffy addict like myself, until Faith was involved. Makes sense, since she's such a baddie. Her stages in the game drove me up a wall, though, and I remember sitting and watching him fight the Kakistos boss again and again, because the shields that dingus put up are really tricky to bust, while zombies kept smacking you in the head. It's also cool that Eliza Dushku, among a few other actors in the show, lend their voices to the game. It really adds to the immersion that this could be another episode set sometime in Season 5. The only voices that don't make it in are Sarah Michelle Gellar and Allison Hannigan, but their in-game voices actually do a fantastic job mimicking them and delivering some killer one-liners that feel very authentic to the show. I've got to say, the settings and the models do wonders for the aesthetic. There are so many different locations that a fan would be familiar with. It kind of becomes fan fiction in that way. Like, what if Sid the puppet came back? Well, he does. And you can even play as him in multiplayer and at the hospital level. The faces aren't quite exact to what they look like in person, but for PS2 quality, they animate and look very good. Especially as they fight. When it comes to combat, each character has a 3 or 4 button combo specific to them that's like a special move. Almost every character is at their best with hand-to-hand and a melee weapon. But for Willow, she has a fairly sizable magic list to get acquainted with that deals damage from afar and up close. When you hit enemies, the game feels great. The sound effects and animations look on point, and the death spiel of the fallen vampires is a delight. The issue is that the camera is very close to you, and sometimes it takes control away entirely, which means enemies just appear out of nowhere, knock you down from behind, and there's a chance they just keep pushing you down. You have the ability to block, but without being able to lock on, I can sense frustration in many futures. I've been told that the Xbox version is the best optimized, with a better frame rate, improved sound, crispier graphics, and more precise hit detection. It's also a very beautiful game if you upscale it on a PC, emulated. You can also play it on the 360, but not upscaled on the One or Series because of the beautiful world of licensing issues. As I talk about the Xbox, some people may remember that there is another Buffy for Gen 6 that Chaos is a sequel to. Though my cousins have begged for me and even bought me a copy, I have never played more than 20 minutes of that one. Perhaps it will be in another video. I can talk about Chaos Bleeds all day, but as I wrap this section up, I must say I really miss in-game unlockables. Every level of the 12 you finish, you get a character for multiplayer if you rank high, as well as an interview or behind-the-scenes reel. As someone who grew up with DVD special features, this especially stands out to me. I find it interesting to see the actor recording their lines, how the director thought through the items, and more. Plus, the different modes of multiplayer was like a staple of visiting my cousins. I was always Spike, the oldest cousin was Buffy, and the younger cousin was Faith. Another perfect little detail well captured in game is that Anya, good ol' Anya, is super scared of bunnies, and one of the multiplayer types is bunny catching. There's just so much humor and love in Chaos Bleeds, even down to the title music, as well as the purple faded menus. If you're a Buffy fan, this is a must play. On PS2, it'll cost you around 20 to 25 bucks. The GameCube copies go for the most at 50 or more. Yet the Xbox version is the best and runs for 30. Nowadays, it seems like we're sort of in a renaissance of couch co-op, but as a single child, I wasn't often playing multiplayer games, especially before the PlayStation 3 online era. Teen Titans was the icon of kids' TV, and with that being said, a game coming out was inevitable. Does it live up to the hype? Mostly, yes. Is it going to be as good as TMNT Shredder's Revenge? Not a chance. But if we take Teen Titans for what it is, there's 4-player fun to be had. Teen Titans the show knew when to be silly and when to be serious. There are lots of little gags and lots of heartfelt moments. The game's script balances things just as well, both in and out of cutscenes. But I must say, the load times on the PS2 between both areas and cutscenes are long enough to make me roll my eyes. I know that on my personal GameCube copy, this isn't so much the case, and that means the Xbox version must be much better. Regardless, this is a hardware issue, and that's okay. I still appreciate that they have so many in-game cutscenes that play with brevity. The plot is pretty novel, with the crew trying to escape from a video game world they get sucked into. The actual characters themselves look very on-model, and all of the voices come from the show. Each map is a place reminiscent of the show. They are fun to explore with secrets and destructibles you can use in battle. Some of the levels really pop too, with interesting colors, backgrounds, and fun bosses. Each character is playable and has very different attack animations based on their powers. My favorite player is Beast Boy, purely because I love to element stomp foes left and right. Each one is better in certain scenarios, like Starfire's shooting. At a distance, it comes in clutch when enemies are also shooting at you, whereas Cyborg, he's going to be the best against an especially strong melee-centered enemy. I especially love doing the big moves when you pick up a Titan power-up thingy. Basically, it full screen kills enemies, and it's differently animated for each Titan. The absolute style of these moments really makes it feel like you're in the series, and that's what I look for most when I play a game based on a property. Does it feel genuine? In this case, absolutely. While I enjoy the combat, the one downside I felt most is that it sometimes feels like the grab move doesn't work, whether throwing it at an enemy or just picking it up. But with the block and stagger system, you don't really need to throw things on the fly, instead waiting to hit them enough times that they fall over so you can throw them right off the edge of a building. Who says Robin doesn't kill people? My biggest issue comes down to the fact that this is a very repetitive experience of punches and kicks on similar enemies for 4 to 5 hours. I've never been the biggest beat 'em up fan unless it's got a weird story and varied combos, but this one is more generic. The savior is the fact that the Titans are so different to play as, on top of the fact that this is intended to be a couch co-op game. Everything is better with friends or family when it comes to mindless action. This is also another game of the time with tons of stuff to unlock. I did not play enough times to get really a lot of stuff, but there are so many characters to get for multiplayer modes, as well as harder difficulties and concept art kind of stuff. I love these sorts of optional bits in games. I really think they should come back. If you're looking to buy Teen Titans yourself, the PS2 game goes for about $20, GameCube goes for $30, and Xbox goes for way too much money, costing over $200. The reason why? Well, it came out an entire year after the other two ports, and that means it released only on Xbox a full year into the 360 lifecycle. Late releases often mean that version ends up being printed and sold in lower numbers. Supply and demand kinda sucks, right? There are also two very beloved GBA games that play more like a side-scrolling platformer, as was the style of the time when it came to ports on handhelds. The first one actually came out before the console game. In order to get through certain sections, you would have to change which Titan you were on the fly. In the sequel, you unlocked the other Titans as you played. Plus, the music is charming along with those sprites. I'm a sucker for that look. I do not have too much to say about these because I've really only seen a gameplay a few times, but if you crave more Titans, these are viable options. While we're on the topic of beloved cartoons, Kim Possible is one of the best. I used to constantly sit on the floor by an outlet and play the GBA Kim Possible 2, Draken's Demise. I remember so little about it outside of the mole rat segments that I gleefully proposed that my cousins show me the PS2 counterpart aptly titled What's the Switch? It was developed by Behavior Interactive, who have gone on to develop Dead by Daylight, which is certainly their biggest success. Despite them being attached, Kim Possible plays pretty stiffly. It's the controls that take it down a few notches for me. There's not much here outside of jumping, swinging, and very basic combat. The thing I like the least is the wall jumping. They try to make this very age-friendly with almost automatic jumps, but after growing up and playing Uncharted's parkour sections, it's a little funny to struggle with bouncing between walls. I often didn't know when to actually grab onto the ledges, nor did I know when to hit jump, because in one part it was exact, and the other it felt like a miss. I think there's something about playing this on modern displays that gives us a lot of lag, as well as there just not being a lot of visual signs as to where her hitbox is going to fall. With that being said, it's not all bad in the gameplay department. Playing as Kim, you can use her gadgets to do different things, like swing with the hook gun and mess up enemies with the electronic scrambler. There's also Shigo, who fights with her glowing green hand that hits harder, as well as her magnet thingy that drags objects and enemies towards herself. Then there's the more puzzle-based sections with Rufus the Mole Rat that offer a welcome change of pace. His sections are kind of my favorite, and I think that's the older me giving justice to the baby me who couldn't do them puzzles at 5 years old. This is also a collectathon with many little emblems, health points, and more to pick up as you go. You'll do this to get unlockables like music, trailers, and concept art. This is the third one we talked about that does that. It's almost like it's a sign. Bring it back, developers. The areas look bright and fun, the models look fluid, the voice cast is legit, and the side-scrolling style is used quite well. I dig the pseudo 3D playing area with the 2D backgrounds. If you're trying to relive 2K Disney vibes, this game is only on PS2 and will cost you a cool 18 to 20 USD. Though in all honesty, I think emulation will run significantly better if you're into that sort of thing. I have not had the chance on this channel to say that I was once a major fan of comic books. Marvel was my bread and butter, with Image Comics being in the running for the most influential to my storytelling preferences. I'm trying to be less of a hoarder these days, and that means I sold about 75% of my comic and trade collection. But I have kept most of my spider-related content, to be fair. For a long time, I religiously collected and read Ghost Rider Spirits of Vengeance, as well as the new issues following Robbie Reyes. I was also the prime age target for the silly Nicolas Cage films, not that I ran away with love for them like I did for Constantine. Anyhow, I had the intention to play Ghost Rider on the PS2 for years, so I finally got to it, and wow, that was a runaway hit. It opens with a stylized comic panel cutscene that gives you the basic synopsis as to who Ghost Rider is and why he's going to hell. Plus, this is a scenario written by the putrid soul of Garth Ennis, who I love even though he writes the most vile things to ever exist. The story is a very small part of the ultimate puzzle, but for what it is, it's totally fine. The star of the show is the Devil May Cry style system and AA hack-and-slash mechanics. It plays so well, with its reasonably distanced camera and hit detection on top of a plethora of moves to unlock. They introduce all sorts of enemies that I really did not tire of, because there's such a variety to ground types, flyers, giants, weapon wielders, and more. My favorite enemies were the ones with rings around them where you had to reach a certain level on your style gauge to be able to break the shield and go in for the kill. The look of Ghost Rider as he unleashes his epic last resort attack is also fantastic. The developers just really understood what makes Johnny cool. His flaming head is always in focus, reflecting off walls and sucking the fire out of candles to regain health. Plus, you get to ride his motorcycle in arcadey segments, jumping over blocks, sliding into demons, and whipping other riders with your chain. The only downside to the bike was that the controls can get very loose when it comes to directing Johnny left and right. You can see me struggle to make my way around things as I slowed down, but it was not a deal breaker. It's somewhat easier to just fly through and focus less on everyone else. The music is another standout, something I didn't expect here. There isn't a lot of music, so to speak, but the softer background music that changes into epic heavy metal as you roar through your battles is hype. I didn't find it to get boring as I went. When it comes to world design, most of the game is in hell, but instead of black sludge and fire everywhere, the game goes for a destroyed chapel kind of look that really keeps things interesting. There's scary looking pulsating walls, fallen pillars, ominous steps to nowhere, and lots of moving parts in the inaccessible areas of the stage. Luckily, things do come up to Earth at a carnival of all places, and I found that the gray color scheme used as a shorthand for nighttime didn't drain the fun from anything. The whole game just looks really nice. I have no complaints. If anything, I want it to be longer, seeing as it's only 4 hours or less to beat, with little replay value since you get so much money to upgrade things after almost just 30 minutes of playtime. I just wanted more overall. The game was only released on the PS2, PSP, and GBA. The Game Boy port is as expected, a side-scrolling beat-em-up. It's obviously much more limited in all ways, but I think the real downside would be that there aren't nearly as many combos to buy and pull off for the satisfaction. The PSP should be praised for how it really was just a smaller PS2, and the gameplay of that port can show this in its full glory. Sure, the models are a little sharper, but that's fine so long as the frame rate is consistent, which it is. The interface is all the same, the music is nice, we're all good in the hood. With both the PS2 and PSP versions costing just under $20, it's up to you which one you get. Plus, if you're feeling fancy and you come across the PSP one, you can always get one of those components or HDMI adapters to play your PSP on a TV with ease. Few things sound more enthralling to me than getting Ghost Rider in one of those UMD movies while eating hot Cheetos on a late night. 10 out of 10 would recommend. Alrighty, so our last game is part of a failed standalone video about Cowboy Bebop on PS1. 2 weeks ago, I made a very heartfelt Cowboy Bebop the movie essay that flopped on release because of copyright issues. A sad day for me, really. The plan was to make a 10 to 12 minute follow-up video on both the PS1 and PS2 game, but whatever, it was not meant to be. So here we are now. Ta-da! First off, I have to give all of my love to the beautiful little cover of the best of version. It encapsulates the heart of the characters so well, and the colors are perfect with the line art. The version of the game I have is the standard edition with a cover that still impresses. The graphic design expertise is on full display with the disc slot art of the swordfish continuing on to the manual. The type kerning of the Cowboy Bebop name is also just crispy. The full-color manual is striking with a few bonus pages showcasing group and solo art that I want to just eat for how pretty it is. I also love the clip art from in-game that shows the familiar and new characters who have small bios underneath them. Manuals are so iconic. I nearly go out of my way to buy a game if I hear it has one in 2024. The art of Toshihiro Kawamoto inspires me all the time, with his work on Bebop being era-defining. The game really pushes his vibe, but with it being mostly 3D, things don't translate so well. In the game, the ships themselves look perfect. Yes, they have sharper edges than the animation, but the colors are exact, the scale is ideal, and the sounds of their blasts do wonders for immersion. The portraits, again, look good and on model. It's the things around them that look a little funky. As you go to different human-inhabited planets in the show, things are bustling on both the streets and in the sky, but in the game, the models are so subpar and dead. The textures look either too stretched or too condensed, and it's not the prettiest thing to look at. As I say this, I understand that this is a flying shooter, so do the backgrounds really matter when you fly past them? No, but you can tell they aim for greater things visually when you look at how intricate the colors of the sky are. I wish they went less 3D and did more of a 2D or even a parallax scrolling side view shooter. I personally think that would have aged much more gracefully. At the same time, visuals are only one ingredient to the soup, and gameplay is much more important, especially because the game is not very English friendly. I'll get into that more soon. The gameplay is fast, with your dreams of piloting the swordfish a reality. It's not quite as nimble as Spike can get it to be for us, but the impact of your different attacks is very grounded and fun. You have a massive aiming reticle that basically covers an entire enemy, so missing is not an issue. I also liked how the arrow attached to the reticle that helps you locate where other enemies are is easy. The area that a lot of the ships take up is massive compared to the screen because a lot is going on at once. When explosives get involved, it can really crash frame rate every once in a while. The explosions look good, but they just cover the display area, and as one would think, it's really hard to shoot in those conditions, so just blast away all willy-nilly. Even though you see the Bebop and Phase Redtail, you can only play with Spike Swordfish. With it being a short game of only an hour or so, there's not a lot of time to get sick of it, thankfully. I doubt a new Bebop game will ever come to the surface, but the ideal experience would be a combination of the three ships, as well as some on-foot fighting. Maybe there'd even be a Persona social link kind of thing, where you hang out with the crew between missions without all those fanfiction self-inserts. I tend to really dislike those sorts of characters because they never have any personality. I know that's the point since you're supposed to be them, but it's so dull and disingenuous to hear these characters we know talking sweet to some flat stink. With all of that being said, the game was only released in Japan, and all of the story is told through dialogue with characters popping up in the corner of the screen. There really aren't any cutscenes, so my usual strategy of Google translating photos of the dialogue couldn't work. The only way I could get anything out of the story was to leave my Google Translate app recording audio as I played through a mission to then pause and read the rambling words. It wasn't ideal, but it worked well enough. There's no fan translation plans, no script to read in English, not even any guides to follow. Because Bebop is so beloved, you would think it would have gotten something for Westerners, but no. I suppose realistically, the game isn't anything spectacular, and at the time, a lot of anime-based games didn't get pushed outside of Japan, so it sort of is what it is. Really, this was a trend that even went well past the PS2 and 3. The game is also just a Star Fox copycat, and I feel like that's kind of uninspired. From what I gathered in the story, there really isn't one. The stuff they say is almost purely talking about the mission and what to shoot at, when to shoot, how to shoot, and that's kind of it. There are a few moments of silly banter, but it's not the focus. The shooting is. In a more positive light, I do think the shooting is fun. It's a really good game to just turn on and zone out with if you're in that sort of mood. It's enjoyable to see the crew and hear them talk, just as much as it's great to hear some jazzy beats. The music really is good. While it's no Ace Combat, it is more Bebop. And sometimes that's all you're looking for. So if you'd like to buy, it goes for around $35. If you can find it cheaper, I think that'd be a better sell. Try anime conventions. I see copies at those more often than not. Alright, thank you for watching. I hope you had a great Thanksgiving break, and I'll catch you next time with something different.